All right.
Racially based.
This
What a stupid thing to say. Sorry.
This. Let's just do this. There we go. What are you doing?
What is that?
There we go. Okay.
It's a host. You put on it.
Ah,
This is gonna be cool.
All right. This is one of the things I like to talk about if I get a chance, just because I think it's rather incredible. It shakes me a little bit, I'll be honest, because it makes things really, really real. I think I spend a lot of time going like, I don't need proof, I don't need to prove this, I don't need to prove that, you know. And then to get it, you know, it kind of shakes you a little bit, right? It makes me anyway go, wow. I mean, this isn't just something that you just kind of put a blind faith into, but this is something that, you know, God will help us on. He doesn't leave us orphans, you know. And so what we have here is Eucharistic Miracles. There are a lot of different ones. I'm going to look at some of the more famous ones and the ones that have actually been studied scientifically, and so forth. All right. And there are several that you can look up. Some of them are a little less credible, maybe, than others. The ones I'm going to tell you today have actually been studied by scientists who didn't really know what they were getting into. All right. So, anyway, I'm going to tell you some. I'm going to just kind of go through the stories of some of them. Then I'm going to share something. We'll share a few things that unite them all. They all hold certain things in common. Okay. So, the first one is the miracle of Lorenziano. All right, which happened in the 700s. You had a parish priest who was struggling with his belief in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and so as he elevated the host changed, but didn't just change, leaving the accidents like we talked before, seeing bread, seeing, right? But changed, you know, visually changed, okay? And he, you know, I can't imagine what exactly he did, but the precious blood in the chalice also changed to visible blood, not, you know, with none of the accidents that we were talking about a few weeks ago, right? So these things have been placed in reliquaries, and they've actually done tests on them and things like that. So you have,
Excuse me, placed in what?
reliquaries, which you put a relic in.
Okay.
One of them's a monstrance, and well, I guess they're kind of both sort of monstrances, sort of. But they keep them in safekeeping, right? And they have actually allowed them to be tested. I think the latest tests that were done on the ones from Lorenziano from 1972. But anyway, so that's kind of the story. And this parish priest's faith was bolstered. This, of course, became a pilgrimage site, and you have a kind of Eucharistic revival that takes place as a result of this miracle. So, looking for the kind of the proof in the pudding, and looking for, you know, the fruits of this. I mean, the fruits were a Eucharistic revival and a bolstered faith. So, you know, God doesn't always do that for us, right? But He also doesn't always leave us in the dark either. I think sometimes He does things, you know, if we need them. So, anyway, that would be the first one, right? Let's see. It's 1,200 years old, over 1,200 years old, and it's still. I mean, it's still there. It's not dirt. It's not dust. It's pliable. It's still, you know, when you test it, it's still flesh. It's still blood. That's what it is. So, all right.
On display somewhere?
Yes, in Lorenziano, Italy. Yeah, it is, and there's actually it stays in a monstrance here. I'm not sure what you would call this, so I just kind of said reliquary, but it's behind a big glass thing. There's lots of people who come by and see it. I do know that they do take it out from time to time, but anyway. All right, that's the first one. All right. The next one was the one I was trying to get to load, and I wasn't able to get it to load. And this is the miracle at Tixla. Now this one I think is 2006, I believe. We'll check it out and take a look. But this one, there was, I believe it was a sister that was an extraordinary minister in Mexico, in Tixla in Mexico, and she noticed that one of the hosts had something on it, something red on it, and so she took it to the priest, and the priest didn't quite know what to do with it. I think they tried to dissolve it in water, and it didn't dissolve. So they contacted the bishop and did some things like that.
That's the one where she found it in the tabernacle? Or in the chapel?
No, that one is the Buenos Aires one, I believe.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Yeah.
So it turns out that when they examined it, the red substance seemed to come out of the host itself. It wasn't just kind of on top of the host or anything like that. It was coming out of the host, and it didn't stop. So anyway, there's that one. We're going to.
Right.
I've got some pictures of it here in a second. That's what I was looking for.
Brad, can I interrupt for a second?
Yes, sir.
You may have already announced this, but there is an exhibit this weekend up at Knox Catholic High School, Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 5 on the Vatican International Exhibit of Eucharistic Miracles of the World. They hosted it in St. Jude just a few weeks back, and they had well over 1,000 people attending. But that's coming up this weekend.
There you go. So if you're interested,
At
it's
Knox
not,
Catholic High School,
not far.
10 to 5, Saturday and Sunday.
It's not far. It's not a hard trip.
It's an hour from here.
Yeah. But this is a photograph, and there are various other photographs too. I'm kind of moving through each one of them, and they seem to kind of occur whenever there's like a crisis of faith, either in an individual who's like closely related to or in contact with the sacrament, or if there's like a general kind of crisis. Okay. So this is the photograph from the miracle at Tixla, and I couldn't get it to go into the PowerPoint.
It's a miracle.
Yeah. All right.
Texas was in 2006.
Tixla's 2006. Yeah. Okay. Santarem is in Portugal, I believe, and this one happens in the 1200s, and this one happens, I'll tell you the story of it. It's pretty impressive. Essentially what happens is that a woman thought that her husband was cheating. A woman in the community thought her husband was cheating, so she wanted to know for sure. So she goes to a witch, all right? She goes to a witch, and the witch is like, here's what I want. I want consecrated host. And bring me a consecrated host, and I'll tell you what you need to know. Okay? So this woman goes to Mass, and she sneaks a host out, right? Sneaks the Eucharist out, and she's going to keep it and take it to this witch the next day. She puts it in a box in her room. Do you know the story? Yeah, she puts it in a box in her room, and then she's awoken in the middle of the night as light is emanating from the box. And the box is like, nope, not gonna hold this thing. It's like, so it's freaking her out. Okay? So she gets into a panic, takes the Eucharist back to the parish and gives it to the priest, and it bleeds. Right? She doesn't like drop it in the poor box, does she? I don't think that's this story. I don't think that. She takes it back to the priest, and they find that the Eucharist is bleeding, and they do the things where they write the bishop, and they put it once again in a monstrance, and there it is, once again preserved. And in case you're thinking, well, they treated it with this or that, they didn't have this or that to treat it with. All right. So these things have been tested, and they all have some things in common, and I'm going to tell you about them. All right? Okay? The next one is in Buenos Aires, which is in 1996, and the bishop that they sent this one to, we know him pretty well, Francis. Now, this one, there's two hosts in this picture, but I only know the story of the one, but there may have been two. Anyway, in this case, someone found that a host had been put on a candle stand. All right. So the sacrament had been placed on the candle stand and left. So someone brought it to the priest. The priest saw that it was kind of dusty and dirty, and so he did what he thought he should. He put it in water to try to dissolve it, and it didn't dissolve. Instead, it bled. All right. Now, okay, so these are, there are many others, right? And remember, like I told you the other day, every day is a Eucharistic miracle, right? Jesus Christ coming down on the altar to be with us and to commune with us is a miracle, right? But these things are the extraordinary things. You ever thought to yourself, God, I mean, why have you just decided in this postmodern world to stop giving us all these miracles? I mean, we read about them in the Old Testament and New Testament all the time. Why don't you do this stuff for us? It's because we're busy, making TikToks and whatever else. So, now, here are the things, yeah, you can flip that on. So you've seen those photographs and things. Here are the things that these have in common. All right? First of all, they have been they've been analyzed scientifically. Okay? And some of them have even had electromicroscopy, whatever that is, how do you say that, done. Okay? All right? To try to analyze them and say, okay, well, what is this, Right? Here are the things that they find. It's human flesh. Okay? Human flesh. So they look at it under a microscope, like the Lorenziano in 1972. They look at it under a microscope and they say it's human flesh. I mean, there it is. All right? The other fun things about this is the tissue is cardiac. And you can tell the difference between different types of muscle fibers and things.
Sure.
And these are all when there's a Eucharistic miracle where there is flesh involved, right? You know what I'm saying, though, right? Yeah. When that's the case, it's cardiac. And here's the other thing that they noticed. It's showing signs of being in distress, like the tissue is. There's certain chemicals when you are wounded, when you're injured, and things like that. There are certain chemicals that your body, puts out into the blood that shows that. There are certain things about this heart tissue and this cardiac tissue that you can see that shows that it's in distress, like somebody's been beating on it.
They checked the DNA sequence of it?
Yeah, they looked at the DNA. We'll get to that one in a
Is
second.
it, first of all, is it male or female?
We'll talk about that in a second.
Okay.
Okay?
Hold on to your hat.
Hold on to it. All of the ones that have flesh involved are show this, okay? When it comes to the blood being tested, it's human. And all of them, type AB. All of it. Every case is type AB. Okay?
And what's the blood on the Shroud of Turin?
Come on, man. That's my big.
Oh.
That's okay. I do it to Bill all the time. I do it to Bill all the time. All right, so it's human. It's AB. It's got heightened bilirubin levels, which is in the blood. If you guys know what that is, if you get bruised, as the bruise heals, it leaves this kind of yellowiness to it. Whenever you've got, whenever blood cells get damaged, then your liver and stuff puts out bilirubin, and it has it in there. So, for example, if you were to go and like cut yourself and drip it over something, all right, even if you were, had AB blood and all that kind of stuff, there would be no bilirubin in there, or it would be normal levels. There's always bilirubin, but it'd be normal levels. The levels of this are just like, and they're like, this is somebody who's, already dead.
Flogged to an end of life.
Yes. Who's undergone extreme suffering or beating or something like that. All right. And so much so that sometimes when this happens and they kind of keep it secret to have a blind test, the scientist will come back and say, "Where did you get this? Because I'm not going any farther with this until you tell me where this came from." Because it's freaking them out, because it looks like, all right, this is somebody that's like
Being killed.
dead, or
You're dead.
right? Okay.
There's a crime here.
So it's human flesh, it's cardiac, it's been wounded. It's human blood, it's type AB, and it's wounded. All right? The other thing is when they looked at the Tixla, host, what they noticed is that it wasn't sitting on top of it. Instead, it was bleeding. The blood was coming from, when they looked at it under a microscope, the blood was coming from inside. All right? So it wasn't like it was just kind of forming there, even if it was just kind of forming on the surface, miraculously. It's actually coming from the inside. All right? So that was another thing. When it came to the DNA, every last one of these, every one of them, inconclusive. Every one of them inconclusive. So if you're looking for it's blood. You ought to be able to get DNA out of it. You ought to be able to figure, nope, inconclusive. Boom. There's DNA there, but they can't do anything with it.
So one of the ones that or multiple ones that I read about, and it might have been in the flesh, was that it was the flesh of a Middle Eastern male.
Now, I don't know that one. I haven't heard those in those studies that I saw. All of these studies are online, by the way. Yeah. Now, there have been things that have been, just FYI, the church doesn't just go out and be like, everything you see is, right? There's been a lot of them that have been discredited as being, there are certain forms of mold that can happen with kind of unleavened wheat bread, and the mold usually is red. It's not the same color as that. It doesn't look like that, but sometimes you'll get these red blooms and things on top of. And when they do that, they find, well, it's mold, and it's pretty easy to do. You don't go through all of this and find all these things. Now, like Brendan said, all of this, as far as the blood issue, all of this goes back to the Shroud of Turin as well. And when they did the tests on the Shroud of Turin, they found the same thing. They found it's AB blood. They found that you've got high levels of bilirubin. In fact, there's so much bilirubin in the blood on the Shroud of Turin that it creates a halo around the blood stains. All right, showing that the blood was separated. You guys know what the Shroud of Turin is?
Yes.
I do, he doesn't, go ahead.
See anybody that, okay, so there's a lot of people who believe the Shroud of Turin is Jesus' burial cloth.
It's in Turin, Italy, and it bears the outline of a bloody human body.
Yeah.
Not just the outline.
Right.
It's,
there's facial features.
well,
Facial features.
yeah, the funky thing about this, and I know a bit about what's going on there. For the longest time, they thought it was a painting, and they thought it was just some sort of unknown painting. So they did tests on it back in the 70s, and they were like, what are we dealing with here? And in the 1970s, they still didn't know what in the world it was. But what they did back, I think it was in the 30s, there was a photographer that took a photograph of it, and when he took his negative out, the negative was three-dimensional. And so it cast this three-dimensional, so you've got a two-dimensional, two-dimensional surface that has on it a three-dimensional image, which you can do. I mean, artists know how to do it.
Sure. That's, yeah, it's a hologram.
It's kind of like a hologram, but it's not a hologram. So, anyway, in the last time that it was studied, they actually discovered what happened, or here's what they said: how this had to have happened. They don't know still yet, but essentially the image was placed on the linen shroud, which, by the way, has pollen on it from plants that are now extinct, that were only located in essentially in Israeli area in Israel. The carbon-14 dating on it dates to 100 years before or 100 years after Christ's time, which is pretty typical of carbon dating anyway. You can't get too very accurate with it. Which would also mean, if it was 100 years before, that's just when the linen was grown, that's when the flax was grown. But what they did is they looked at it and they said, well, the individual strands in the shroud, the individual threads and so forth, they're actually not scorched, which is what they thought that it was. They've been irradiated. So what happened is that flax being a plant, right, and then you crush flax and turn it into essentially linen thread, and then you weave it into a garment, okay? So the cellulose, which is what plants are made out of, right, the cellulose in the linen thread has been denatured, it's been denaturalized by a really high amount of radiation. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because that high amount of radiation should have burned the whole thing up. So what they've said is that you've had a very high and very punctuated, like a microburst of really, really high radiation that just kind of flashed and produced this image. But then they thought, well, the image doesn't actually, that's not working right exactly either, because in order for the image to be on the shroud the way that it is, there would have had to have been a separation between the body and the shroud itself, on both sides. And the shroud was wrapped from like, you lay a body on it, and then it wraps over the top. So it would have had to have been like this. And what they're saying is, for the image to be right, there would have had to have been a separation. The shroud would have had to raised off the body. Then the body would have to rise up off the shroud. And then there would have been this burst of energy, and that image would have been. And whatever body was there, it was of a Middle Eastern man in their early 30s who had been beaten severely, right? Lost a lot of blood, soaked up in this thing, with pollen from the 1st century AD. of, Israel. So, anyway.
So was that DNA inconclusive, or were they able to?
They're not been able to pull any DNA off of the shroud that I know of. But all of these things, all of that has all been.
Is AB blood like a baseline type of blood?
I think it's the most common.
It's
The
the
most
universal donor,
Okay.
right?
It's actually one of
Is
the
that
rarest
right?
blood types.
Huh?
I think
It's actually one of the rarest blood
Oh,
types.
I thought it was.
I thought it
O
was
positive,
negative.
the universal donor.
Yeah.
AB is the universal receiver. Then.
No, that's O negative.
Well, AB is one of something. It's something. It's like really rare or something. A lot of people don't have AB.
I think it's AB negative, that's the one that's very rare.
Okay. I'm not sure if it's positive or negative, but
I feel like I've read that some of them, they've been able to tell that it's AB positive.
okay.
Yeah. It says AB positive is known as the universal recipient because AB positive can receive red blood cells from all blood types.
So if it's AB positive, it's a universal receiver. It can receive all blood types.
1% of the US population is
Too
AB
bad they
negative.
didn't have
One?
the Red
One
Cross.
is AB negative.
Oh. I thought AB positive was the universal something.
Yeah, AB positive universal recipient.
Yeah. Interesting. I just think it's interesting, So, and I also think that there's a lot of folks have been trying to kind of undo this. Now, the Shroud of Turin, just go back to that one a second. It was carbon dated at one point, carbon dated back to the 1200s, I think. And everybody was like, oh, it's a fraud. But actually what they did is they cut a patch off of it. So the shroud was burned in a fire that had some burned edges on it. And so the sisters who were in charge of it clipped those burned areas off and patched it with cotton. And the areas that they first tested when they did carbon dating on it at first had some of that cotton, the cotton fibers mixed in with the linen fibers, and it jacked the reading up. And so when they did another carbon dating test, it went back to the 1st century AD.
Interesting.
Yeah, very cool.
And there, that traveling display it was at St. Jude, I missed out, I think I'm gonna try and hit it sometime Saturday or Sunday.
There you go. And an interesting thing is Blessed Carlo Acutis was behind, during his life and building his websites, was behind trying to promote knowledge about these things. And I think this traveling exhibit is kind of part of his agenda. And he has been exhumed and found to be incorruptible.
Meaning?
Go into
Sorry,
that.
didn't.
Huh?
Go into that.
Incorruptibility. So, is it in the Psalms that it says that God will not allow his saints to see corruption? And so, some people have taken that to be like the scriptural foundation of all of this. But some of the saints, my favorite one to look at is St. Padre Pio. Some of the saints, why are you being this way?
It's a miracle.
Yeah.
So, some of the saints is quite a common occurrence back in the early church to kind of move saints' bones and bodies around and such. And in the medieval period, they did that as well. And when they would do this with some of the saints' remains, they began to discover that some of these folks
Decomposed.
haven't decomposed and they're hundreds of years old. So
Not just haven't decomposed, some of their blood's still liquid in their body. Their eyes move around, not like they're looking around, but as they're adjusted, like, it's not,
Fixed.
yeah, fixed, like, there's
my favorite one is Padre Pio. This will open, probably won't. He died in what, 67?
something like that.
Yeah. The internet's just doing whatever. But essentially, what happens today is, and happened in medieval times, is that when they exhumed the saint's body to kind of move it around, or put it into a better internment of some sort, they would pop it open and take a look. And they found that a lot of this, so that now that if someone starts on the road of sainthood, like Father Ryan in Chattanooga, they exhumed the body. Did they find him incorruptible?
I don't know either.
I don't know if it's
I
been
thought
said.
I read that they did in the
Oh,
newspaper.
that Father Ryan
Yeah.
was found incorruptible. Very good.
So if you're.
Cause they're starting to use that as
incorruptible,
partial proof now.
Yeah, well, it definitely helps your,
It's not a make or break thing,
Yeah.
but it definitely helps.
it helps your case,
Yeah.
helps your cause.
That's
Sure.
probably then, I'm just thinking out loud here, probably why they put Lenin in a glass coffin.
Except for one thing, they mummified Leonard.
Yeah, but they didn't tell anybody that.
Yeah.
So everybody could see him, so they could.
Lenin was
Bullshit.
beyond mummified. He
Yeah.
was he was almost stuffed.
Right. But they
He
were
did
trying
same
to
thing
make
with
it
Jerry
like
Piven.
he was a saint.
Oh yeah.
I just realized you were not talking about the fabric, Lennon.
I thought,
No.
yeah.
Lenin. Lenin.
When he said Lenin's body, I was like,
Not
yes.
John, but.
When you said Lynn, I went Beatles, so.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So now we're all on the same
Not
page.
John.
Vladimir Ilyanov. Yeah.
Right.
That music brain goes there.
So anyway, take a look at that.
Yep.
He died in 1967.
And still hanging out.
Yeah. And I mean that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. And again, it's not a make or break thing, and there are some, it's different degrees of incomposition that have happened. Like, you look at some, and you're just like, okay.
Must have lived right.
Some, and then others, you're like, been dead a while. But,
Then again, there are some saints that were chopped up into little tiny pieces and
Yeah,
spread
sure.
over.
I just mean like, you don't wanna,
Yeah.
take it as like, if it's a saint, it's gonna be perfectly preserved or whatever, like sometimes they're, it's not always one or the other, and that doesn't have anything to do with their sainthood or how holy a life they live.
And there are first-class relics in every Catholic altar,
Oh.
should be.
Now that doesn't look real. Now there's also like hearts. There's a lot of different things.
Is that St. John Vianney?
Yes.
Yeah, and that heart was brought to the cathedral last year or the year before.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to show you Carlo Acutis. Didn't he die like 17, 18 years old or something?
Yeah.
Millennial saint body.
A saint that wore Nikes
Yeah.
or Adidas.
3 stripes, baby.
Huh.
Three stripes till we die.
Yeah.
So there you go. And that's not like right after he died. He was buried in that jumpsuit, and this is after they exhumed his body, and it's now, I guess you'd say on display, because it is.
I'm sorry, who is this?
This is Carlo Acutis. He was a teenage, back in the early 2000s, he was a teenage, like web designer and stuff, and just a devout and pious young guy that did web design and tried to promote Eucharistic revival. I forget, I don't know a whole lot about it. What did he die of?
leukemia.
Died of
Maybe
leukemia?
like the patron saint of video games, something like that.
Could be. Patron saint of web design.
He's not a saint. He's
And
blessed.
yet football
He's on the-
coaches
on the
still
path.
don't have a patron saint. In fact, no coaches have an official patron saint.
So
I'm
he's the
pushing
same?
for,
They're not living.
he's blessed.
Well, one of these days Tom Brady's gonna quit, and he'll
Tom Brady
die,
is Catholic.
and then he'll die.
He's Catholic, I don't know how much of a practicer he is. They need to look at maybe Vince Lombardi or
That's why he
something.
wins.
Chuck Noll's Catholic, right?
It would make sense that the Rooneys would hire a Catholic.
Yeah. I believe it was. I believe all the great football coaches are Catholic. The Rooneys.
Oh, there's the evolution.
The guy in Alabama is Catholic.
Yeah, Saban's Catholic.
I think he's not supposed to.
Lou Holtz?
No, he's
Lou
not.
Holtz Catholic. All right.
So do we know what relics in
I wish I
the
could
altar
be
here?
blind.
The I think an assertion has been that it's
It's not that I don't like sports, I just don't like.
is it Saint
spectating them.
Dismas?
St. Longinus.
Saint Longinus, sorry. Dismas is the
I
good
haven't
thing.
really
Right.
used-
Yeah.
I wanna
St.
break
Longinus
the
was the Roman
mountains
soldier
towards
who
the-
thrust the spear into Jesus' side. But we can't verify
Stick
that,
with
but
class
that's
round.
what has been passed down. I know Father Mike's done a lot of research into it, and that's what it seems to point to, is that what the relic that we would have in our altar would be from St. Longinus, so.
So
Pretty cool.
You're the same one that said truly he was the Son of
Exactly.
God, played by John Wayne.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the greatest story ever told.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
in our, St.
I remember that. Is my phone over there?
Yeah, that really meant a lot to me. For some reason, because John Wayne did the cameo, it meant a lot to me.
No, it's just a part or something that is.
You guys had any other questions? This is kind of just a random Q&A night, so if you got anything else you wanna ask about, throw it out.
And thank you for the tidbit on Chuck Knoll, just another reason to continue loving the Steelers.
See, I was right, right?
Yep.
Yeah, man. See, I looked into all that. I was like, man, we need a patron saint of coaches, just in general. I
Wouldn't that be
put-
Saban?
No, I would think that it would be Saint Barnabas, the encourager.
Well, he is the patron saint of athletes.
That's Sebastian.
Oh, Sebastian, my bad.
San Sebastian. Yep. But you know, the encourager seems to me like that would be right. But yeah.
And so you're a patron saint?
St. Lawrence,
St. Thomas Aquinas?
at halftime, he said he'd turn me over, I'm done on this side.
I don't know, I don't think I'll put
Saint
Bob Knight
Columba.
as encourager.
And he is the patron saint of?
He's one of the
What,
patron
Thomas
saints of
Aquinas?
Scotland. He's a patron saint of Ireland.
Students?
Hmm?
That's St. Thomas Aquinas, he's not-
Oh, that's a coin, oh, I thought it was.
There's
There's
a
a
saint
lot
that
of-
is both the patron saint of Ireland and Scotland.
Uh-huh.
Well, that seems like a war waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Well, no, the Irish and the Scots don't bang heads against one another. It's just it's really just the English trying to set one another against each other. So.
And today is St. Bridget of Ireland.
That it is.
I thought today was St. Bosco.
That was yesterday.
Yes.
Today? Oh,
St. John's.
Patron saint of chocolate.
St. Bridget. Supposedly there's a legend that she popped her eye out when she was threatened by the Vikings.
Really?
Like they were going to come after her to assault her.
So she popped an eye out
So
to be
she-
gross?
That was there's a legend that she just went,
Oh, yeah.
but I don't know if that's true.
What was that
She's the
gonna do?
patron saint of brewers.
Could be.
Wait a minute, if she
She
was
is
gonna
the
get,
female patron saint of Ireland.
if she was gonna be attacked by Vikings, what would popping an eye out gonna do?
Gross
they would
them
be
out.
Like, ooh,
Yeah.
no thanks.
Like, who wants to look at that? Unless you're into
Well,
skull,
if
you know.
you're ready to rend people apart.
Yeah,
With swords, then
I
you
don't
may
wanna
not
get
be
into
so
it.
disturbed by an eyeball popping out.
I don't want to get into it. I don't think they wanted to hack her people.
Kind of like
Hey, we're gonna get
berserkers,
started.
if someone's gonna run naked into a battle, you're not gonna mess with that person.
Yeah.
Well, you're not gonna touch
Here, then
them.
we-
You might run
What else?
through.
Body part.
Anything else,
We
guys?
digress.
Anyways.
Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Excellent, Brad. Excellent.
Alright,
That stuff's fun.
if there's no other questions, it's already after 8:30, so we will do adoration sometime in the next couple of weeks, and we'll, introduce you guys to that, but from what you've seen, and, as the Holy Spirit continues to work on Brad's laptop, when we talk about the Eucharist and it being the real body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ, these miracles just serve as a kind of a bolster to our faith, and so, as Catholics, one of our prayer practices is to adore the most blessed sacrament, because it is Jesus Christ. And so we have a great blessing of being able to utilize being in the physical presence of Jesus. And it's a great place to go to sit quietly in prayer and to be close to Him and allow Him to speak to us. And so we'll save that, because I don't want to rush it, it's starting to get late. So we'll save that for another
So
night.
what is the most recent one of those kind of miracles?
Probably Carlos Acutis.
The
Or
kind
are
of-
you talking about Eucharistic miracles or the Incorruptible?
Eucharistic.
Eucharistic.
The Eucharistic, I think the one that's been kind of confirmed would be 2006. Although I think there was one in Rio or one in Brazil that was really recent, but I think it's still kind of being
Well, what was the 2006?
Tixla in Mexico.
Oh,
But as he pointed out, the one in Argentina, that was back when Pope Francis, Bishop Bergoglio, as he was known then, he was the bishop over there. And so what he did was he took samples and sent them to New York without telling them what it was. And these scientists and medical doctors examined it. They ended up becoming Catholic when they found out what it was that they were studying, because they were just like, oh my gosh.
They didn't know what it was, and they determined that it was, they weren't told what it was, they weren't led down the path.
Right.
That's the video you sent me.
Oh,
Yeah.
here's the other thing, is that, the one in Tixla has been really looked at, and I guess there's been a lot of access to it. This one I forgot, is that when they put it under the microscope recently, they found that there apparently was some dust or something that had gotten on it, and the white blood cells in the blood were attacking the dust and attacking the contagion.
So it's still doing its thing, huh?
So the blood is living.
Alive.
Huh.
You say that's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
Life is crazy.
Yeah.
The universe is crazy.
Well, it gives a little more oomph to "I am the living bread that came down from heaven."
So the next time somebody comes to you and goes, I'm gonna prove that God exists, there you go.
Don't need to, we already know.
Oh, you can go online though and find people who are arguing against this.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Well, of course,
And
but
incorruptible saints, and you saw it right there with somebody trying to reproduce St. Padre Pio's body, be like, "It's a mask."
it's a rubber mask.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I think a lot of scientists get into the business just to disprove all their learning from when they were young. I mean, they seem
Sometimes.
to be on the other side of things, but I mean, I've been watching these videos lately of flat earthers, and it's like, I can't even waste my time trying to agree with them in any way, shape, or form. You know, it's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
To me,
Sometimes it all turns into sophistry.
I think it's
Trying to win
millennials.
arguments.
I think it's the millennials.
I did read
Sorry.
something recently
I'm not
where
Okay.
more and more
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
astrophysicists
Yeah, cause I'm
are
96.
astrophysicists tend to move towards Christianity.
Yeah, that's cool.
There was a big thing, not to belabor any of this, but there was a big study done by these three major scientists, and I forgot, is it the BVG proof? Anyway, essentially they put out here and they said, to paraphrase them, these three guys who are major deals said, there's really nowhere to hide now. All physicists must now, all astrophysicists must now accept that the universe is finite, the universe had a beginning, and all this kind of stuff. There's just, the proof of that is just undeniable.
Overwhelming.
Atheism requires an eternal universe.
Yeah.
And the physics of it all just doesn't work.
Right.
But Aristotle knew that, so.
And that Leonardo knew that if you dropped a hammer and a feather on the moon, they would both land at the same time.
They both bounce.
No, they both land at the same time. And,
Oh, yeah.
and so they did
Yes.
that on the moon. And it did. And it,
Yeah,
Too deep for me, man.
I think it was Apollo 18.
yeah.
Alright, guys. So like I said, next week we'll get back into the sacraments of matrimony. So we're looking forward to picking back up where we've been a little bit delayed. But I wanna thank Wendy and Brad very much for
Thank you,
stepping
Wendy.
in,
Thank you,
last
Brad.
minute, and
Excellent work.
putting this together this evening. And Wendy even made cookies, so.
Yeah, they were good.
You're awesome.
I'm gonna steal another one.
Do remember Brenda and the soul of her sister Mary who passed, and if you didn't hear me earlier, Mary's memorial mass will be next Friday
Right.
evening at 5:30.
This Friday.
Next.
Next.
Next Friday?
The 11th.
Oh, okay. I thought it was this Friday. Prayers for the Dominican priest in Vietnam that was stabbed to death in the confessional
Oh my gosh, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah,
Wow.
yesterday, or no, over the weekend. He's already been laid to rest.
yeah, that's right.
Wow.
He was hearing confessions and evidently had a mentally deranged man stabbed him to death in the confessional.
Man. Yeah.
We're all involved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Let's pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Thank you, Lord, for gathering us here together tonight, for allowing us to talk about some of the great helps that you've given us in our prayer life and communicating with you and getting to know you better and growing to love you. I pray that we utilize these and that in all things we strive to be closer to you, to keep you first in our minds. Thank you for the proofs you've given to us about our faith, that for those with the eyes to see, it strengthens our faith and also calls us to draw closer to you, that you are not just a metaphysical concept, but a very real person acting in our world, and that you love us, and you want us to draw closer to you. So I pray that we take these proofs and rejoice and give you thanks and strive to draw closer to you. And may we always reverence your presence, and the very real presence in the Blessed Sacrament. May we always reverence your presence in our sanctuaries, in our chapels, and may you also be real in our hearts every day and everything we do. For those prayer requests that were mentioned, we ask that you move mightily on behalf of these people, that you let your love be shed abroad in their hearts. And in the coming week, Lord, may we be great witnesses to everyone that we meet of your love and of your presence, of your reality. We ask all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.